Hello, Glamour family. For the last time this weekend, we are live chatting about grief and race in this moment. My name is Marissa, and this is my mom. Yes, we have a thing for pink. She passed away when I was 25, a little over 12 years ago, and more recently I lost pregnancy, and so I've spent a lot of time working through my own grief, reflecting on grief, and just wanted to have a series of honest conversations on grief in this moment. And so I'm really excited. We have some fantastic folks joining us. First up is a dear friend and colleague, Erica Williams, who is a writer and a speaker and has some of her own experiences with grief that we will share. So I'm gonna try and add her in now. Let's see. Hi!
Hi, beautiful. How are you?
Yay! I'm tired.
Aren't we all? But you've been working. You've been working.
Yeah, this weekend has been a little bit aggressive.
Yeah.
But I think we are similar in this sense that, you know, when I'm in pain, I know I need to like take a beat and take care of myself, but I also just feel better when I have a chance to actually do something.
Yep. Yeah.
And so I've just been trying to figure out like what to do, how to do it. And as I shared with you recently, you know, I needed to write. Like that's also something we have in common. And so I wrote it out and ended up having a lot of people respond and say they were feeling the same way. And so, you know, Glamour gave us this platform to have these conversations. So I'm really glad you took the time to join me.
I'm so grateful. I'm grateful to Glamour. I'm grateful to you for thinking of me and inviting me. I'm also on the board of Color of Change. So I'm so grateful that we are raising money for Color of Change too, who have been out here doing this work for quite a while and will continue to. So yeah, this is a good moment for us.
This is awesome. So one of the unfortunate experiences that you and I both share is the loss of a parent.
Yeah.
And so you know grief well. How are you managing your grief in this moment? You know, how are you doing? What does processing look like for you?
Yeah, so I lost my father when I was 16 years old. He was 42. He was a preacher, founded our church in our basement, and was kind of the center of my world. He and my mother together, the center of our worlds, and died suddenly, literally in the pulpit preaching in front of all of us. And so it was, I mean, just traumatic. That's the only way to put it. And so I've had not only that experience and then others since then with grief, but I also witnessed what it looks like when a woman experiences grief and trauma back to back. So my mother, in the period of just a few years, lost her father, mother, brother, and husband.
Are you kidding me?
No.
And then she still had these two kids.
And then she had kids to raise. Yeah. And so I think what I've learned, I mean, there's a lot of coping mechanisms and ways to process, but what I've really learned is that whether you want it to or not, grief and trauma does change you.
Yes.
That's a part of the process. There's a transformation that happens. And so what I've really been doing and sitting with these past few days, weeks, and to be honest, even during the pandemic, these past few months, is not just what should I be doing, and what will we all do on the other side of all of this, but who should we be? If we're going to be changed, what does that type of transformation look like? And I think even as you and I were talking about being busy, which we need to be, that's a part of it too. Yeah. Also taking the time to process the internal changes that need to happen or should result from this experience, from this moment. So I've been doing a lot of that. I've been, there's a real irony in the fact that everyone right now is in the speak up mode. We have to speak up. And I've seen the quote, you know, silence is violence. And I understand it and I get it. And it is true that there are times, and this is one of those times when all of our voices are so essential, particularly those who are our allies, who may have not stood up with us before. But silence is also not the enemy in a different context. That these are moments when we need to balance our speaking up and speaking out with being quiet,
Yep.
listening to each other, listening to God. You know, I'm a person of faith, so that's a part of it. So I've been doing a lot of that too. I've been really intentional about balancing my voice with silence and solitude, and going within and looking up and figuring out, like, what do you want me to be right now?
Yeah. Like, where is this all supposed to take you? No,
Yeah.
I completely agree. Yesterday, I don't know, do you know Joshua Dubois?
I do.
Of course you do. Of course you do. I love it. He spoke with us yesterday alongside his wife, Michelle, and he said in this moment, you know, he's really needed solitude and quiet, and he tries to open up his Bible in the morning before he opens up his phone.
Yeah.
And that, I was like, oh yeah, okay, that's a good one.
Yeah, it's funny, and when we talk about spiritual disciplines, which is the fancy word for just like the things that you do to engage with spirit, right? Silence and solitude is one that in our culture we don't really prioritize much. We don't know how to be quiet. We don't know how. And by quiet, I don't just mean not talking, but I mean like no phone, no technology, no outside voices, just sitting. But it's such a critical part of us even being able to build up the capacity to deal with everything that's happening in the world around us. Like this moment is going to pass. The issues won't, the movement won't, but the moment will pass, right? There's something unique about it happening in the middle of a pandemic when we have this kind of space that both adds a lot of stress, but also has created a very weird opening for us to be engaged and working and doing and paying attention. That will pass.
Yeah.
And so if we don't use this moment to also build up the spiritual capacity, like what do I need to do that even when the world goes, it won't ever be back to normal, but even when the world opens back up and these issues aren't top of mind, we still need to be able to be quiet. We still need to be able to process. We still need to be able to think about the ways in which we should look at the world differently and look at each other differently. So that's what I've been doing myself and also encouraging others to do.
I love it. I love it. Also, someone in the comments wrote, morning routines are key. And so I feel like I have to share. Yes, I 100% agree. I didn't see the name because I think I need glasses. I'm not going to lie, you guys. But morning routines are key. As Erica knows, I have been reading a book that she is now reading as well called The Artist's Way. And one of the things that you're forced to do if you're, you know, really engaging in the book and doing the homework is write 3 pages longhand every morning, which was like, it was a really hard discipline at first, even for someone who writes. But now that I've been doing it for a while, just like getting everything out of my head before I actually start to move in the world has made such a difference, especially in this moment.
Yeah, it's really all about carving out whatever rituals you need. And so, like you said, morning pages has been a game changer for me. And this is like my 3rd or 4th time going through The Artist's Way. It's been so helpful to me over years. Like I've always turned to it. So that in the morning, prayer in the morning, a walk. I mean, that's essential during this season of just getting out and breathing fresh air. But yeah, all of those are really, really important. And starting your day. I was just talking to a friend yesterday, and he said he's been really diligent about starting his day by getting his daily marching orders. Like, okay, today is today. What should I be doing? What should I be focusing on? And truly trying to live one day at a time.
We have to right now, man.
Yeah.
It's crazy. So in addition to, you know, your writing and your speaking, you have also spent your career in activism. Like you said, you're on the board of Color of Change. Yeah. Does this moment feel different to you in some way? And, you know, are you optimistic about where we might go from here?
Yeah, I mean, there's no question it's different. I saw someone the other day on TikTok jokingly say, like, man, I'm kind of tired of living through historically significant moments, right? We've lived through a lot of them in recent years, but this is absolutely one of them. And it does feel different for a whole host of reasons. I really do think the pandemic timing had something to do with a level of focus and attention the world could pay and give to this issue. And then just so many other factors. So yes, it feels different. And I am hopeful. But my hope is not around like, can we get 2, 3, 4, or 5 policy changes? that work, I believe that will happen. I'm grateful that that will happen. But my real hope is that this moment will change how we engage with one another and engage with the world, that we're starting to ask bigger questions. Like, I guess that's what drives me and excites me, is when we have these moments when it seems like everything stops and we have to start questioning, how are we living? We start questioning things like, of course, obvious right now, people are questioning the police and how the police work and how funding works. So questioning that, I'm seeing online all the time, folks within different industries really challenging the power structure and the status quo and things they thought just had to be a certain way. Questioning our relationship to media and story and technology and how we consume things and what that makes us believe. So that's what makes me hopeful. It's the people, the amount of people in the streets. That's amazing. And it's so exciting to see folks standing with us and marching with us and fighting with us. That is phenomenal. But what really excites me is the possibility of us asking deeper questions that could yield changes far beyond policy.
And why do you think this moment has been different? You know, like, do you think it is from all of us being cooped up for so long? Do you think, I mean, I read this recently, I hate to give him credit for anything, but do you think having Donald Trump in the White House led to people realizing how serious these issues of race and inequality, et cetera, are in this country?
This is a perfect storm.
Yeah.
We're living in like 1919 with a pandemic, 1929 with the Great Depression, 1967, the long, hot civil rights summer. Like, all of this is happening at once.
It's crazy.
That is a recipe for something, certainly. And then all of that and I'm sorry if we're not going to get super political today, but like under a fascist administration, like that.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay.
So yeah, all of those factors come into play. We've just never lived through this. And even when I think about and talk to our elders, right, because they experienced so much that we will never, ever be able to even understand.
Yeah.
But what I've learned not to do is compare. There is something that what they went through was absolutely, I mean, it was so much harder than what we're dealing with. There's just no way around it. But the world that we live in is much more complex. And so that's a different type of challenge. That's a different type of struggle, right? And so when we start thinking about solutions and we start thinking about connecting with community, we are dealing with forces and powers and institutions and things that are all intertwined. It's harder to find the truth. It's harder to watch. We're not all watching the same 4 channels.
Yeah.
People are manipulating content. Like, so all of these things make it more complicated. And I think that's why folks are really rising up in this moment and just saying, no more. Something has to stop and something has to change.
I love it. I love it. You're making me more optimistic. So thank you. Today's conversations have definitely made me more of an optimist in this moment. You know, you have I don't want to say, like, a lot of friends who are not Black people. I'm sure you have colleagues who are not Black people. Yeah. How have you seen these folks show up in, you know, recent weeks that has really made you feel seen and supported?
Yeah, I will say that the most valuable and helpful way is when these are non-Black folks who I would already be engaging with ordinarily. And I'll tell you in a minute why I'm emphasizing that. So they're non-Black folks that I would already be engaging with, who have understood the fact that this is not a normal time and then made concessions. And so I'll give you a concrete example. I have a white friend who hosts online events, and I was scheduled to be the featured guest last week. And he was already selling tickets for it, and it was going to be a big thing, and it's for his brand, and I was just, going to join. And it would have been absolutely perfect for him and for his brand to have had that conversation with a Black woman guest last week in the moment that we were in. He called me and said, look, we can't do this, right? Like, you're not in the space to do this. I understand that. Let's just cancel. I've had colleagues who said, look, I know we've got meetings scheduled, but your mental health, your emotional health matters more. So showing up with something that tangibly alleviates pressure, that tangibly alleviates stress and harm, that is the most helpful. What is not as helpful, no matter how well-meaning it is, and I know it is well-meaning, but it was not as helpful for me, I'll just speak for myself and many of my friends who've been talking about this, is folks that we don't know that well, haven't engaged with in months, years, right? Reaching out without really much to say, but
Yeah.
just to kind of, it ends up feeling like you're doing this more for you. And I know that might not be the conscious intention,
Yes.
but that's not helpful. And so I know you do. Like, people are just hitting up, my inbox is just overflowing.
Out of control. Like, and then I end up feeling bad because, like, I'm, you know, generally very responsive and, you know, all for making people feel better, but like I haven't had the emotional capacity for people who are coming to me trying to have me help them feel better. Like I don't have that right now.
No, this is the time for those folks to talk, absolutely, to reach out, absolutely, to each other.
Yeah.
Like that's the key. You don't need to reach out to me.
Yes.
You need to reach out to each other and start collecting. We all say online, collect your folks, grab your people, your family. Talk to the friends who don't understand the gravity of what's happening, who don't. That's the work right now. And that is the absolute best thing that you can do for me, for mine, for this movement, is collect your people. And then again, to the extent that you are an actual friend to me, like that you are someone that I deeply care about and that you care about me, you know, our engagement will flow normally and you'll just check in and see. That's absolutely fine.
Yes. Yes. I love it. That is so true. Is there anything else that you want to share before I try and get our other mutual friend,
Baratunde? I just want to say thank you for centering this conversation in the idea of and the reality of grief and not just action. Action has to come. It has to take. And there are so many brilliant people who are able to guide us in what that action should look like. But we dishonor this moment if we don't also take time, all of us, Black, non-Black, if we don't take time to go within and to understand. Grace Lee Boggs, this is the last thing I'll say, one of my favorite activists. She was actually a Black rights activist who was an Asian American woman from Detroit, and she passed away a few years ago. But she always said that revolution is about a much grander idea of what it means to be human. That's really what we're working towards. And so I'm just grateful for you for giving us this space to talk about some of that stuff. And I can't wait to see you again soon.
No, this is great. And I just have to piggyback off of what you said. You know, if we don't allow ourselves the time and the space to really process and heal, like, we're not going to have the revolution or the reconciliation or the better future that we're all trying to imagine in this moment. Like, you know, from your grieving process, I know from my grieving process, you have to go through that shit before you can get on the other side to something that's better.
Yeah, and you never, it's not something you get over, right? And I think
no, it's not possible.
It's not possible. And if you parallel that, I know I'm rambling, this is the last thing I'll say, I promise. If you parallel that and connect that to what's happening in the country, America wants to always quickly get over grief. And that's why we don't look at
Move on.
Yeah. We can't do that. So anyway, thank you for creating the space for that, Marissa.
Well, thank you for joining me. Baratunde, if you haven't already, please ask to join the chat. Erica, I will see you.
Bye, everyone.
Okay. Let's see if we can get Baratunde in here. Yes. Ooh, it is saying he is unable to join. So we're going to wait a minute and see if we can get that fixed and check our questions. Baratunde, oh, I think we may have him. Hang on. Let's see. Mm, it says he is unable to join for some reason. We'll see if we can get him in here. And in the meantime, if folks have questions, happy to answer them. Yeah, I don't know. They warned me before we got started that this platform is pretty wonky. Let's see. Baratunde, I see you, but I cannot add you for some reason. So I'm going to respond to some of these questions and comments while we wait for him. Some people don't know what to say. Is it better for them to just be silent? I never think silence is the answer. I think even if you just want to tell someone that you're thinking of them in this moment, I think that's better than not saying anything at all. That is my personal experience from having dealt with grief and loss in my life. I can't seem to get our friend Baratunde. I'm going to try one more time. Let's see. Nope, buddy, it keeps saying you are unable to join even though I can see you. Also, anyone who's on here and is friends with me in real life knows that I'm terrible at all things tech. So, of course, I would have tech challenges. Let's see. Yeah, no, I can't seem to get him. No. Oh, okay, hang on. No, I can't seem to get him. I am getting real-time guidance from my wonderful husband. How do I do that? Let's see if we can find him. I just don't know if we'll be able to. All right. I sent him a message. Let's see if he can invite me into his chat. Apparently he's been having problems joining, so he is live on his page. Oh, oops. Yeah, I can't get him. Nope, no dice. Oh, someone just asked a question. Can you share more about your daily routine and how that is helping you to cope with grief right now? Yeah, it's been essential in this moment to take the time to just stay centered. You know, I need time by myself in the morning. In addition to my work on grief and loss and the writing that I do and the speaking and events like this, I also have a portfolio of clients and do a lot of work in the racial equity and criminal justice space. And so I'm constantly in the middle of these really heavy, exhausting, hard issues. And so being able to take some time for myself in the morning before I dive into all of that has been critical. And then it's also been really important, you know, to take breaks during the day. Like we've all been working from home. You know, technically work can go on all day and all night because there aren't really the same boundaries that there used to be. So making sure that, you know, I'm thoughtful and responsible about those boundaries, and also making sure that, you know, I take a break to walk the dog or just put my phone down at some point during the day, even if I'm just hanging out by myself for a few minutes. All right, we're gonna try and get Baratunde again. Let's see. No. Oh, another question. What does allyship look like for you? What are things that non-people of color should be doing at a moment like this? That's a great question. You know, for me, it's a combination of things. You know, I've really appreciated people who, to Erica's point earlier, you know, who are really in my life just reaching out and letting me know that they're thinking of me, that they are doing A, B, C, D things with their kids or with their families to try and make this moment not just, a random flash in the pan, but something that's actually sustainable and actually helps us and our country move forward. I have also really appreciated people who've done tangible things for me. These conversations we've been having all weekend were set up over the course of 2 days. And most of the people who, helped pull this together and helped make this happen, they weren't people of color. They were a lot of people who were working behind the scenes to try and ensure that, there were celebrities and activists and politicians who were available to chat. Let's see, I think I'm getting an update. I don't know how to do that. Let me see. Oh, wait, I think I might have Day. Let's see if this works. Yay!
We have liftoff. Hello. We're like SpaceX up in here. What's good?
I love it. I'm so glad that finally worked. And just so you know, and I feel like I should announce this to everyone, this series of Instagram live conversations I've been hosting this weekend, this is the first time I've done Instagram live. I'd never even watched one before.
You haven't tuned into Versus? Oh, man.
I'm bad. I'm really, really bad.
Well, welcome to the future. It's now. It's now.
This is great. I'm so happy to see your face.
I'm happy to see yours too. And I got to give you some credit. The way your wall blends with the Instagram colors, it's like very on brand. It feels like a fully integrated experience, even though you haven't done it before this weekend. It looks very natural on you.
Well, thank you. For folks who don't know, Baratunde is a writer, a speaker, a comedian, and just all around brilliant human. And I'm so grateful to have him with me for a few minutes today. My first question for you is just, how are you doing? You and I both, unfortunately, share the experience of having lost a mother. Yeah. And so grief, I know grief. You're a Black man living through this moment. Like, how are you doing?
It depends. I think Saturday morning, I woke up and it was very hard to get out of bed. Just physically heavy, emotionally heavy. I felt like I had been through some significant physical exertion. Like I had been to every march in every city throughout the previous, 7 days, even though I hadn't been. And I think it was just emotional processing finally catching up. I kind of threw myself into this. I was like, ooh, there's resources. I got resources.
Yes, of course.
There's thoughts. I'm a thinker, writing and speaking. And so I just kind of jumped into these tumultuous waters. And my body yesterday was like, listen, homie, stop.
Yeah, we're done.
Just stop. So I've been experiencing a range of things from utility and some gratitude to absolute fury and near despair at any possibility that things will actually be different this time. Because like a deep humility where it's like, what? But why am I special? Why is now special? Why are we special? Like way more brilliant, more resourced people tried a lot harder before.
It's true.
And yet we're still making the same signs. So it's all over the place is the short answer as to how I've been. Yeah.
And how are you managing that? Oh, did I lose him?
Can you ask that again? Someone dared to call me. Don't they know? Why would you call me when I'm on live with Marissa on Glamour Mag? Like, that's just so disrespectful.
I love it.
That's disrespectful to Glamour. That's disrespectful to you. That's disrespectful to all Black people. Somebody was just disrespecting all Black people by calling me right now.
I love it. I thought I was going to lose you again. So how are you dealing with all of those emotions? Yesterday, a lot of folks talked about processing. Like, what does that look like for you?
So we have exchanged commentary and experience around grief. And I think I have a similar set of tools available now as I did when my mother died, which is a loving partner. It's very helpful.
Game
to
changer.
just shift some of the burden. Like, I don't think I cooked this week, you know,
Nice.
and I've been cooking up a storm. I've been roasting chickens every which way. I didn't know there were so many ways to roast a
Oh,
chicken.
I'll have to send you my
I
chicken.
know all of them now. So I think I've been able to lean on others, and that's been helpful. I have maintained my meditation, and when I haven't, I feel it in my body and in my spirit. So doing that, some level of physical activity, lots of walking. I live in a beautiful neighborhood where I'm able to walk, and that's very helpful. And then occasional check-ins. I mean, I had, it's funny. I saw somebody in the stream here, Nigerian brother, official Arole Wale. He had me on his stream just about a week ago, and he lives in Nigeria. And I've had two different sort of African experiences this week with people through screens. One was his show. The other was a friend who has a business, Amp Global, and they are based in Mauritius. Though the couple was, created the business here in the U.S. So there was just a level of zooming out and kind of
Yeah.
feeling the love from the rest of the planet
Yeah.
to that helped me feel seen and felt and heard, because there are so many messengers in our society, which is a pretty jacked up society. I'm not sure if you noticed, but America's got a couple of problems. And so just a few. And so it's been really nice to have perspectives from literally other parts of the world being like, we see you, you're not crazy, we're not going to gaslight you, this is really messed up and it's wrong. And that's helped with my process.
No, that's huge. One of the things that I saw that you wrote about that I wanted to talk about is the concept of privilege. I don't know if you've had this experience either in recent weeks or at other moments when we've been through similar, race tense times in our country. But I sometimes feel like some of the white people in my world almost come across as like feeling guilty about their privilege. And for me, the equivalent would be like you or I feeling guilty because, we are Harvard educated and, have figured out how to move in these spaces that are mostly white. And, we figured out at least something about success. And instead, you don't have time to feel guilty about that, especially when you're a Black person. Like, instead, you're responsible for doing things like you're doing, showing up on my conversation today, and, lifting people up and helping to support them and bringing them along. And, I want white people to better understand that they really need to use and leverage their privilege in this moment. Like, can you share your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So thank you for setting that up and feeling that. When you started talking about you are my respective privileges, and you said we know how to move, I thought you were going to talk about our great dance moves, which is a privilege. Like, it is a superpower to be able to like move your body. And no, I do not feel guilty about being able to dance better than most people. Like that's just my burden. Oh, I'm just cursed with these like amazing moves,
Gotta
whatever.
dance at every wedding.
No, I just bring it. Just bring it. Bring that joy. Bring that love. Use your dancing powers for good.
Yes.
So yeah, I think there is. I stumbled into the metaphor that I'm sure people have written about. I wasn't the first to think it, but it just occurred to me, the absurdity of Superman being like, oh man, I got this super strength. I could fly. I could shoot lasers out my eyes. And just like whining about it, which is just so not Superman-y.
No, not at all.
And so
the opposite of Superman.
Yeah, so you use it to help people. I also try to, and I often fail at this, but I think it's important, probably especially in these moments, when as a Black person, as a Black man, I'm feeling, oh, people are paying attention. Yeah, y'all got to like empathize. But I'm also a man. And so if I'm ever spitting something that sounds like, that's really wise, then it's like, am I doing that? How could I do that? Where do I have power? I'm not just like target of oppressive regime.
Yeah.
I was born into this body with all kinds of unearned access to credibility and people listening to me and folks taking me seriously. So am I using that? I don't feel guilty about being a man, but am I using my manness to help elevate all humans? And that's because that's what I'm asking white people to do in this moment. And so when I flip it on myself, I realize, okay, it's not always obvious. It's not always easy. And there can be a bit of trepidation. Like, I don't want to do this the wrong way. Should I just retweet random women? Like, I can feel the types of questions that a white person would ask about a black person. Like, I can ask myself as a man. And so I approach it with some humility sometimes, often not. Sometimes just like, it's obvious, do the right thing. Like, why do I have to teach you? But then if I'm being good and practicing what I'm trying to preach, then I recognize that it is not always clear what that looks like. So to the white people who are joining this conversation, like, thank you, first off. Thanks for the acknowledgement, for trying, for being willing to make a mistake. And there are, Erica, I tuned in right before I joined. I just co-sign everything she says, because there is this question of like how and where, and we all have places that we live. We have a neighborhood that we're in. We have a company or a school or a church. I just heard Ibram X. Kendi talking about this too. So I'm hearing Erica and Ibram both saying what I'm going to say to you, which is in your most local sphere of influence, with your homies, with your family, start asking some of these questions about that power and what has it looked like? What has it felt like? Have you ever wondered, oh, is it because I was just so dope? Or maybe it was white privilege,
Is it because I was just so dope?
Yeah, is it the secret, or was it white supremacy? And it doesn't mean that you're not dope. Both can be true, right? And that's kind of the twisted nature of this construct we're living in. It twists us all up, but we have to work to untwist it, and that's not for Black people alone to do. In fact, Black people alone can't do it. We need the folks benefiting from the systems to deconstruct it and rebuild something better with us.
Yes, I love it. I love it. So, you and I feel like are similar in the sense that while we know it is not our responsibility to fix this as Black people, we know it's not our job to teach white people how to be, how to show up, etc. We do both kind of care to provide those kinds of resources because we know that we have them and we know that we can be helpful, and it's just kind of what we do. I saw recently you shared a bookshop that you have, and I know you've been sharing some other resources, and since we know there are some non-Black folks who've tuned in to share this conversation with us, I would just love for you to talk a little bit about those resources.
Thank you for that. You're great at this. You've never done this before?
No.
Give it up for the host with the most, y'all.
Thank you.
So yeah, I too am learning how to use these tools even better. And so my IG profile link is becoming a gateway to a bunch of resources. So anyone watching this live or after, just go to my profile and click on that link, and it explodes into a beautiful cornucopia of consciousness. And so I built, I digitally assembled a bookshop, and I love this organization, bookshop.org, because it does what Amazon should have, which is make it easy to set up your own bookshop with shelves that you want to promote. And the money, I get some commission on the sales in terms of transparency, but then their money goes to local independent bookshops that the buyers get to choose. And that's how, again, that's Superman. That's using your superpowers for good. We could all make the Bezos wealthier, which, probably not necessary. Or we can support our communities, especially during this COVID time when it's very hard to support our local businesses. So the bookshop, the world-saving bookshop is what I called it. And there's history books that set a context, because I know there's so much in the US that isn't taught and media doesn't want to discuss. And if we don't understand where we've come from together, we have a hard time getting somewhere different together. Then there's practical. There's all these people but what do I do? And how do I have these difficult conversations? And there's a shelf for that, right? There's books for kids after a lot of requests and parents to share with their kids. And there's books that kind of get beyond that focus on solutions and where we could go. And I've got books on masculinity in there as well as climate justice, because it's all interconnected. So I love that. And then I have other people and other buttons in my profile who want to follow other folks here on Instagram, who are doing this work. But I think what I like about books is that there is no additional emotional labor incurred by the author.
True.
And so if you're out here with a question, I heard you and Erica talking about the white people who show up and kind of hit you up and want to do this kind of vampire thing with your emotions. How are you? What are you feeling like? It's like, I met you that one time at a conference. We're not there yet. But a book can answer questions without burdening the author. And so it's a much more respectful way to get some of these things addressed, especially if you're kind of new to the discussion, or, and it's awkward to just go to like your Black family member or friend or whomever and hit them up with it, because they didn't sign up for it, but authors did. So hit their books. It scales. It's good. And, they'll get paid.
I love it. That's fantastic. Yeah. Also, I'm told by the person I live with, who is husband/tech supervisor, that I say I love it a little bit too much. So I need your help coming up with a new Instagram Live phrase for when I'm excited about something. So I want you to think about that.
Yeah, I've already thought about it, and I'm not trying to get between you and your partner, but there is never such a thing as too much love in this world. So I say, keep loving it, keep expressing that love, and maybe your partner can find a way to interpret it a little bit differently.
He's great. He was my messenger when we couldn't get you on. You're, standing behind the phone going, he's trying. Can you do this live? So he's wonderful. I love him very much. And
that's very good.
Not how, he just wrote, love it in the comments.
I see you, M. Bolson.
Oh, man. I have Senator Booker up next.
All right.
I really hope he's watching and we won't have any connectivity issues.
Yeah.
Are there any questions that you would like me to ask Senator Booker?
I mean, right off the top, so he's a member of a legislative body which has been hijacked in terms of its ability to get things done because of the control by the Republican Party. So if you're willing to go there on the political front, I want to know what his advice is for regaining control of the Senate, because we have an out-of-control president and an out-of-control Republican Party that's not willing to check him. So they're not admissible to my view. So that's one. And then I think there's a real question about these reform efforts. And I'm about to do my own live show in a little bit over on Zoom. And there are people who've been in this work, and Senator Booker is one of them. And you got to feel a bit unsatisfied with where we are as a nation. So how does he reckon with the reform efforts? Obama, Clinton, even the Bushes, people have tried, governors have tried, mayors have tried, and yet many of our cities are spending 30, 40, 50% of their budgets on policing, which is a very limited tool for all these other problems. So his take on what does he need from the people to get the real reform done? And if he can be as real as possible, because I know there's Senate stuff, and it's like, then the right and honorable minister from, that's British. But I feel like they can't be real. And I want him to just bring it real, because we are ready. And I feel like our leaders aren't ready. So what do we have to do to push them to catch up to us? That's my question for him. How do we help him get this done?
To push them to catch up to us. I like that. Okay, folks who are watching live, please hold me accountable and feel free to write that question down just in case I forget. All right, Baratunde, I'm going to let you go. Thank you so much.
So much, yeah.
And Senator Booker, I hope you have requested to join the live, because I don't know how to add you. Sorry. What does he need from? All right, I see the question. This is good.
You know how to add me. That was magic. I didn't even see you. Your hands were in the air, and somehow I came on.
I do have magical superpowers. How are you?
I am very good. You don't want to give credit to the love of your life there that you told me, that you said earlier was handling the tech for you?
He has been pretty fantastic. He did come in to let me know that you were ready, so we didn't keep you waiting for too long.
Okay, because my significant other, she'd let me have it if I didn't give her, the appropriate due and took credit for her work. But that is a man gendered problem we have often, is men taking credit for women's work.
I've heard that's a thing.
Yes, it is.
So
It is.
tell me how you're really doing.
So,
I know
so first of all, that was great to watch. I thought that was a great conversation.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you very much.
I want to know how you're really doing in this moment. You are a Black man in America living through this nonsense yet again. How are you doing?
Look, this has been, first of all, I appreciate you saying really doing, because a lot of times we ask that question, we don't slow down to hear the answer. But it's been an emotionally supercharged week where or now more than a week, 2 weeks, with just feeling every emotion. Really, I'm raw. I'm from rage and anger to just grief. This sort of unpacked grief that you build up over years that gets calloused over as you go about life. Suddenly, that's just ripped open and stuff comes out. So it's been the weirdest thing for me, because I'm not like a weepy guy, but I've definitely had these like normal sort of highbrow interviews where I've just gotten emotional, and it's hard. And especially when I start talking about the fact that we've been at this for decades. I remember taking to the streets in college after the Rodney King verdict and writing one of the most emotional charged columns for our student newspaper, Stanford's newspaper. And I read that new article on the floor, a column on the floor of the Senate, because I just wanted to show people nothing has substantively, the words I wrote then about the how somehow capturing everyday American reality for Black Americans on videotape, and still you can't get justice. And the sort of stinging reality that article, interestingly, I entitled it, "Why Have I Lost Control?" Is now something I'm still feeling now. So this has been a moment of great emotional tumult for me and millions of other Americans. But I actually think it's a really good thing to let this stuff out and to channel it into what I'm witnessing now. I mean, we were marching back 30 years ago, little less than 30 years ago, but now it's like in a little short period of time, you see diverse racial coalitions, religious, ethnic, age, all 50 states, small towns, big cities. And this is in a time of a pandemic when, let's be frank, it'd probably be 2x the number of people, if not more, out there marching. So this gives me hope, and I'm about to introduce legislation tomorrow that would not have been possible 3 weeks ago. And we have, my sister and partner in this, Kamala Harris, partnered with, on the House side, Karen Bass, who's head of the Congressional Black Caucus, Nadler, who is the head of the House Judiciary Committee, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer. We're coming together tomorrow to put forward the most advanced police reform legislation in ever.
I love it.
So, and we're going to get, and I've been having conversations with Senate colleagues all day, we're going to get a lot of co-sponsors of this legislation, people jumping on board. So I am, at one point, like a lot of folks are, everything is suspect because a lot of us have been involved in reforms before and haven't seen the substantive changes. So everything has got to be suspect. But I am encouraged that in American history, every great advancement, suffrage movement, abolitionist movement, civil rights movement, to get the Americans with Disabilities Act, labor movement, all of them have not been led by people in office in Washington. It's been led by people in the streets, nonviolent protesters. There's an old saying, change doesn't come from Washington, it comes to Washington. And so here we have this broad coalition demanding this change, giving a lot of space in here for me and others to actually write legislation that now has more of a chance of passing than ever before. Substantive, real change that could save people's lives.
So I want to hear more about what you're planning to introduce, whatever you're allowed to share, because one of the things that I have struggled with in this conversation around race is so many people want to say, it's not political. It's about hearts and minds, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't believe that. I think fundamentally, because of where we are, we're not just talking about racist people and some of the racist comments that pop up in this chat. We're talking about a matter of life and death, especially for Black men in this country. And so I want to hear more about, what you're planning to introduce and how we can all support you.
Well, I just want to pick on that issue for a second because it's such a powerful point you just made, and we shouldn't let it go. The racism is baked within the system. It doesn't necessitate, like white supremacists, they've been with us. They will always be with us. I wish we were doing more to combat it. More people have died from right-wing and white supremacist terrorists since 9/11 than since foreign terrorists. So let's be clear. I can name everything from, attacks on mosques, attacks on a black church in South Carolina. White supremacists and right-wing extremists are killing more people since 9/11 than the terrorists that are so glamorized, or not glamorized, but so focused on by the national media, I should say, appropriately. So what you're saying is something more insidious. So let me put myself out there to be really real. I'm an African-American guy. I was elected to be mayor of the largest city in New Jersey. We had a black police chief. We had a majority black city council. We knew we had inherited a police department with generations going back to the riots of challenges, and we set about reforming it. And we felt like we were making progress, right? And it wasn't until the DOJ came in and did a deeper dive on the data than we had the capacity to do that brought up and saying, you guys aren't moving that fast. Look at all this bias baked into the police stops that were being made, the patterns and practices. And so here is a lot of actors with all good intentions. We did some really good things, drug courts and youth courts and prisoner reentry programs. I'm proud of a lot of work we were doing. But for the average African-American who's experiencing that police department, it's not fast enough. And so there's a lot of good lip service. There's a lot of good intentions. There's a lot of work and activity, but we can't mistake activity for progress when the bigger issues. We've got to find a way to go through. And so I just want to put myself out there to say, it's not like, it's not this conscious racism that's out there. It's this understanding that implicit racial bias, institutional bias is baked into every element of our life. I'm not being overly dramatic when I say this.
No, not at all.
As an African-American woman, you are more likely to die in childbirth, 3-4 times more than a white woman. And how much money you make has no effect.
No, not at all.
Not at all. It's a black child. They've done studies controlling for everything, more likely to get out of school suspensions than a white child. A black boy is more likely to have his age misunderstood, so that people expect them to be older, more of a threat. I could go through economics. You could go through a great Harvard study that was done about who's more likely to get hired, a white person, a black person, a white person with a criminal conviction, a black person with a criminal conviction. And they actually found that for some jobs that it would be the white person without a criminal conviction, or white person with a criminal conviction, than a black person. You can go through all things where they've done the same resumes, just separating pictures or changing the names. So we know that and we've had big leaders in our society admit this. Former head of the FBI said, if I'm walking down a street and I look on one side of the street and there's black youth and one side of the street and there's white youth, I will reflexively think that the black youth are more of a threat. So from economics to healthcare, the number one predictor in America, whether you live around a toxic site or not, the best predictive indicator to look at is a person's race. And so when you go through these things, you begin to understand, and much of this is the legacy of generations of laws that went all the way up to the 60s and 70s that were over. My parents had to get a white couple to pose as them in 1969 to buy a house to grow up in. And even when they confronted the real estate agent for breaking the law, the real estate agent punched my dad's lawyer and sigged a dog on my father. So this is 1969. So if you don't think that that is still an affection, and so the question is not, I'm tired of the question of who is and who is not a racist. That's not the important question. The important question is, does racism exist or not? And if your answer is yes, then the question is what are you doing about it? Because it's not enough to say I'm not a racist. The question is what kind of anti-racist are you? And that goes for black people too.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah, it goes for all of us. And so many of us who enjoy these rights and privileges that we didn't earn, in other words, You name, I don't care if you're Irish, if you're gay, if you're a woman, you're enjoying privileges that people sweat, died, bled, and for. All of us are. We're in this country where, if you look at humanity, the mere fact that we can mention that we're American, we have industrial nation privilege, okay? And for us not to recognize that we can't pay that back, we've got to pay it forward by fighting for the broader justices. So I just want to use that as a framing. Let's get out of this idea that, oh, I'm not a racist, I'm not sexist. No. It's what are you doing about those ills that exist in our society? Because the last thing I'll say, then I'll get into your specific question about tomorrow, is we don't stop to recognize the jarring incongruencies between our words and the reality in America. Everybody here has put their hands on their heart and said, swore an oath, we're a nation of liberty and justice for all. Those words represent a nation in search of itself, because we haven't achieved that. We live in this land where we call ourselves the home of the brave, and we incarcerate more people than any nation on the planet Earth.
Yeah.
1 out of every 3 incarcerated women on the planet are here in the United States, and overwhelmingly nonviolent. Overwhelmingly survivors, over 80% are survivors of sexual trauma. And then we compound the trauma by shackling pregnant women in prison, by not training male security guards on trauma-informed care. So you're marching in on women undressed, using the bathrooms and more. If you go to prisons like I have, if you sit and talk to incarcerated women who are forced to make their own tampons because we don't have menstrual equity in this country, these things are all things that take hurt people and hurt them more.
Yes.
And then release them into a country that says, if you have a nonviolent drug conviction for doing things that 2 of the last 3 presidents admitted to doing, that you have a lifetime sentence because you can't get a loan from a bank, can't get a Pell Grant, can't get a job, can't feed your families, and so on and so forth. So I can continue to deplore the system. We torture children in prison by putting them in solitary confinement. I could go through all that, but now let's talk about the fixes. Because
what are we doing and how can we help you?
Yes, Martin Luther King said it so eloquently. I love what he said. He says, I can't legislate you to love me, but I can legislate you not to lynch me. I can't pass a law to change your heart, but I can pass laws to restrain the heartless, right? So let's just start there. Let's stop people from lynching folks. And I use that dramatic language, but we saw in broad daylight.
Dramatic at this point.
Yeah, we saw in broad daylight a murder with impunity. They knew they were being filmed, and so our legislation is going to be banning practices, chokeholds, no knock entries that killed Breonna Taylor, no knock warrants. A lot of these practices. It's going to make sure police can be held accountable, getting rid of something called qualified immunity that stops them from being accountable for civil penalties, something that allows them to be subject to criminal prosecution on the federal level, and then also does a lot to create more transparency so Americans could know what's going on in their police departments. How many use of force is, when they use force? What do the people that they're using force look like racially, demographically? What about police-involved killing? We don't collect that data. Let's see what's happening right now, because you saw this with Ahmaud Arbery. You see this with Breonna Taylor. This stuff is happening out there, but we don't even know about it until something happens, like a videotape comes forward or something like that. So this is the most sweeping bill ever on police accountability. And it wasn't possible a month ago because people in the streets have been leading this change, making space for this change. And what you can do to help is to begin to name the bill and demand that your representatives get on the bill. And let's build this. So I'll try to make sure that my staff gets you, if you want to post it, like there's a general number to call for the Washington, one number you can just ask, tell them where you live, they'll tell you who your representative is or your senator is. And this is not partisan, this is common sense. And we're hoping that we get more and more people on this legislation. It's basically are you on the 1964 Civil Rights Bill? Are you on the 1965 voting rights bill? Are you on the 1968 fair housing bill? Well, I want people to ask, are you on the 2020 police accountability bill, the justice and policing bill? And that's really what they can do. But I think that Bartunde had a couple questions for me that I heard, and I don't want him out there. Listen, he's a good brother. We have respect between each other, I'm sure, but he'll talk about me if I don't answer his questions, right? Like, I just know he will. And you notice how he dropped, I got my podcast, I got my thing coming up.
So
I felt like I didn't know if he meant it as a threat, but I thought he kind of was saying, if Corey doesn't answer my questions. So I want to be clear with him that Mitch McConnell most likely will not put this bill on the floor for a vote. The House of Representatives, Nancy Pelosi, will bring this to a vote. They're going to start the process of marking up a bill. But he's right. If in 5 months, in November, we don't change the control of the Senate, not only this bill, I'll go through the bills. I mean, you've got anything to deal with climate change, forget it. They won't do it. Anything to do with the Affordable Care Act, preserving people with pre-existing conditions, not going to happen. I can go through all the issues that the majority of Americans, not partisan, legalizing marijuana. I can go through the bills that the majority of Americans would support, that Mitch McConnell has been stopping from getting to the floor. And so the only thing I can say to that is vote. Vote. You represent the demographic, Black women in America, that have the highest voter turnout percentages.
We don't play.
Well, 66% to me, in school, if you got 66%,
Not the best grade.
not the best grade. It is the best relative to all other demographics. But if African Americans voted at 70-something%, if women voters voted at 70, talk about women's rights and securing a Roe v. Wade, for example, I would love to see that passed as a law of our land legislatively. All of these things necessitate higher voter turnouts than we're seeing right now. If there's ever any election, I feel like 2020 is trying to tell this country, we're going to give you 1930s like depression economically. We're going to give you a pandemic. We're going to force y'all out to the streets because too many of y'all got comfortable. All these things are heading towards this big colossal election where you have a president up whose own generals now are turning on him, who just turned in front of, ever since Alice Paul, the first person ever to be arrested in front of the White House for protesting for suffrage rights. Ever since her, this is the first president really like turning the forces against peaceful protesters in front. So there is so much on this ballot that I'm not telling you who to vote for, but come on now, if you turn out to vote, you'll make a difference in a lot of these Senate races and a lot of these this in the presidential race. But it's even deeper than this, because people forget that the local elections, when you say what you can do, the federal government doesn't have as much power over police as local leaders do. And so your prosecutor, many states, those are elected. Judges in so many states are elected. Mayors over your towns are elected. And so you want to make sure that you're asking questions about where people stand on these issues. But when greater voter turnout happens in this country, it usually shows a big steps forward in terms of issues of justice, equality, and inclusion in this country. We saw the 2018 elections were some of the highest voter turnout elections in the history of midterm elections. And in a blink of the eye, dramatic changes. You have Native Americans serving. You have more openly gay people serving. It just became such a much more diverse world out there when people participate. So that's the last thing I'll say. What you can do is, all the things that we hope you'll do to advocate for legislation that makes sense to you, only if it makes sense to you specifically, like we saw in the civil rights movement. They were asking for specific legislation often. But then the next thing is participate in this in a way and demand those officials are accountable to what you want to see as we reimagine policing in this country. And we reimagine, frankly, so many issues to make this a more beloved community. because that's the last thing I'll say now. You're never going to invite me back because I'm talking too much. But this is very important to say. We have decided complicitly or explicitly in this country that we will treat mental health issues with police and jail. We've decided we're either complicit with it or it's explicitly being done that we are treating addiction in this country with jail and police. We've decided we're going to criminalize poverty in this country. Anybody who's had warrants out for their arrest, for unpaid tickets, and more, we criminalize poverty in this country. We've decided we're going to criminalize race in this country. More likely to be, and that's the irony, is black people are more likely to be stopped by police, but when white people are stopped, they find drugs more. So we have decided that we're going to deal in our prisons and our jails with all kind of problems. And it's such a poor reflection of the love we have in our society, the reservoirs of love and compassion we have. And it also makes no fiscal sense. There's lots of studies, but my favorite one is in Seattle. They just said, what's more expensive, to have Americans with mental illness homeless on the streets or put them in supportive housing? They studied the cost and they found out that it was so much more expensive to keep them homeless on the street because they ended up where? Hospital emergency rooms and jails involving police and first responders. I mean, we've created a society where we are hurting those populations more and more by sticking them in institutions that not only do not serve them, but hurt them. And then when you come out, if you're poor, you're more stuck in poverty when you come out. If you're addicted, your addiction has not been treated, you're more vulnerable. If you're mentally ill, you've often had things happen to you that trigger your mental illness and further hurt your mental illness. And if you're African American, well, you know what? You now live in a society where more African Americans are under criminal supervision than all the slaves in 1850, because we have so criminalized one population of this country. And so this is more than just a policing issue. It is an issue of how we are going to choose to deal with the vulnerable and marginalized in our country. Will we deal with them with love, support, elevating human dignity and human well-being, or will we deal with them with police and prisons where we harm well-being and assault dignity and ultimately create generational problems? Because the children of all these incarcerated people, trauma.
It's terrible. We need to figure out how we stop starting people in this country. I'm going to ask you one last question because I know we're over time. But in the middle of this very difficult moment, when there are all these demands on your time and you're trying to make this legislation happen for the rest of us out here, how are you finding joy? Like, what are you doing to take care of yourself?
Lots of connection with friends where you laugh and you cry. And I'm sure you've had those conversations where 1 second you're crying, 1 second you're laughing. I have an incredible significant other who has taught me the hard lessons of my life about that it's okay to be needy. It's okay to have to reach out. And I've been reading a lot of really good people. I feel like I'm reading more spiritual books recently, from Martin Luther King's sermons to Brene Brown, who talks about the courage and being vulnerable, and that is actually showing great strength and courage. So, and then the last thing is lots of gospel.
Yes, I did Aretha Franklin's Amazing Grace.
Oh, one of the best. I have this gospel mix that I just have overplayed, and then Spotify suggests new ones for me, and I'm always just adding on. So I have a gospel list with probably 100 songs on. I just put it on mix, and I hadn't listened to it this whole weekend because we were negotiating this bill. Just this morning, it just sourced my soul. So I've been leaning on the Lord and leaning on friends more than I normally do, and actually letting my emotions out more than I often do. And realizing there's a lot of pent up stuff in there that I probably should have let out a long time ago.
Well, I am glad that you are finding ways to support yourself, even during this difficult time. I really appreciate you taking the time for this chat, and I'm going to make sure I connect with your team so we can share the information on how we can support you right now.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
100%. Thank you
Amen.
so much, Senator. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Take care now.
Of course. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bye-bye now.
Okay. Huge thanks to everyone who turned in. And I see a bunch of you have been telling me to block someone. I actually don't know how to do that because this is my first Instagram live, but I promise I will figure it out for next time. And I hope that everyone is finding ways to really take care of themselves and unplug and find joy in this moment while you also work to support others and help us all reimagine a better future. Thank you so much.